Hello everyone and welcome back to another autumn coloured pencil studies tutorial. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2, I will link them down below because we're going to get a little bit more complicated in this video, so you might want to practice some of the more simple studies first. We're going to be drawing a pine cone together, so grab whatever coloured pencils and paper you have and let's jump straight into it. Okie dokie, so for this tutorial we are going to be drawing this pine cone together from a reference that I took myself of a pine cone, again that I found in the garden. In all of the previous videos for this series we've focused more on just getting the drawings down, not worrying too much about all of the little shapes and details and getting everything perfect. But in this case, pine cones are a lot more complex. They've got all of these little scales that make up the overall shape of the pine cone. So we kind of do need to focus more on the pattern and the shapes within it for it to look right. So we're taking everything that we've learnt so far about adding shapes, values, depth, contrast, all that kind of stuff. We are now applying it to a slightly more complicated subject, taking our time a little bit more. So for that reason, this is going to be the one and only subject that we draw in this video, and we'll see what happens when you do spend a little bit more time on a drawing. So we're sort of levelling up our skills a little bit here and we're taking them to the next level. So I am going to start out with my standard graphite pencil, the Staedtler 2B. Use any pencil that you've got. And once again, we're going to look for the basic shape in this pine cone. So it's definitely a little bit rounder on this left side and then it gets a little bit more tapered to the right. So I'm going to put it about here. Very rough sketch. Okie dokie, I might just give that a little bit of a dab with my kneadable putty eraser just so that I can tidy it up a little bit more, because it's going to be a little bit more complex when we start to add these scales. And I did have to Google what the little pieces on a pine cone are called, and that is the technical term apparently. So yeah, all these little pieces are scales, so that's what I'm going to be referring to them as. So just tidy it up a little bit if need be. I think I'll just leave it at that for now. So the next thing that I'm going to do is try and decipher a way to draw these little scales and make sure that I get the pattern somewhat accurate. I'm not going to stress too much about getting every single little piece in exactly like it is on the reference. Once again, we're going to take inspiration from this and do the best that we can. So for me, I feel like the best way to tackle this is to first of all count how many rows of these scales that I can see. So if you have a really good look at the reference, they sort of come down in rows in this diagonal sort of downwards motion. So coming from the top left and then slightly down to the right. So I'd say that there's about 9, 10, maybe 11 rows of these scales. But there's 9 or 10 main rows and then there's a few little pieces sort of coming off them. So sticking with that number, I'm going to start to do some little lines just coming down and do some rows of scales. So I'm sort of adding my little borders as to where each row is going to start and end. So let's add one here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they get a little bit smaller as you get to the left. So 6, 7, 8, and then 9. Then I might end up adding an extra few here as well. So around about 9 rows. I mean, if you want to play around and correct the shape of those a little bit more, you can do. But that's the general gist. We're breaking it down into little rows. So now that we've broken that down into rows, I want to break it down into the individual shapes of these scales, and I'll just show you on a scrap piece of paper the general shape that I can see. It's almost like a little bit of a weird diamond shape. It varies depending on the placement of the scale, but I'd say overall it's a little bit like this. So a bit of a weird diamond shape where the edges sort of curve in on the left side and curve out on the right side. And then there's a bit of a line down the middle and then a little bit of a rounded bit in the centre and then another line down the middle. So that's the general shape of these little scales, but obviously the more to the right you come, you can only see half of them, so they're a little bit more like this, with that little rounded bit there. And then as you get to the left of the pine cone, some of them are just little circles like that. So it really does depend on the placement, where they are on the pine cone, but that is the general shape that we're going for. So with that in mind, let's go back to our what looks like an Easter egg or something, but it's going to be really helpful for us in placing these little shapes. So let's just give this again a little bit of a dab with the putty eraser. We're not trying to completely rub it out, so we can just about see it. Okay, and then starting from the top here, going to start mapping in some of these little shapes. So really take your time with this and do one little bit at a time. That's all you can do. It's like a little bit of a rounded bit at the top of that one. There we go. Let's add a little bit of a line there, and I'm holding my pencil really high up so that I can get those nice like geometrical shapes in there. I'm being quite square with my pencil lines. So let's start from the one below it. So just here, a little rounded bit. Like that. Then there's one just below that, comes down here, little rounded bit there. Okay, so that's one row, and then I'm going to do the one that's slightly to the right here. So that one sort of comes down like that. Don't worry too much about getting them absolutely perfect. As long as we get them around about in the right place, then it's all good. And then there's one just underneath there. Then I'm going to add this little one here that's on the end. And then there's one in this little gap here between these two. Again, it's a bit of a funny shape. Don't draw what you think you can see, just draw what you literally can see right in front of you. We're just breaking it down into little shapes, one at a time. And often there's one between each gap. So here, there is another one just in the middle of the gap, like that. So we've sort of done the whole right hand side. So we're back to adding our rows again now. So we're going to start from the top. The topmost one that I can see here, and it sort of goes up off the edge a little bit like that. And don't worry about making mistakes, because we can easily fix anything that we do that looks a little bit off. So it's that one at the top. Then there's another one in between here. And this is where you start to see a little bit more of that diamond shape. Albeit it's a little bit of a funny diamond shape, but it's still got that sort of four-sided diamond-like shape. So again, a little bit down the middle there. Then I can see another one here. Where that little scale has sort of broken off, I'm just going to ignore that and carry on drawing it as if it's normal. So it's one of the beauties of art, you can add things in that aren't there. So I'm just going to draw that like a normal diamond shape, and then that little bit in the middle. So as you do each one, it sort of forms three sides of the net shape, and then you sort of just add in that last side in. So here, just add in that last little bit, and then a little bit down the middle. Then we've got right to the bottom, and I'm just going to add that little one that's sticking out there. Like that. Okay, and then I'm going to go on to the next row, start from the top again. So let's see. Sort of comes up here a little bit. So we're taking it one at a time. And this is the one where it's broken off. So again, I'm going to just pretend like it hasn't. And I'm just going to draw it in like normal. And do a little bit down the middle, like the others. Then we're going to add this little one here. Just added one when I need to add two. I'm just going to add this next one underneath it. Then there is another little one underneath there. I mean, it wouldn't have been the end of the world if I just did one. So what I might do is I might just bring that one next to it down a little bit more. This is kind of what you have to do. You have to make adjustments. And if you've added one in and not left enough space, you can just move it a little bit and make room for it. Or you could just leave it out and just pretend like it's not there. This is what I mean. You kind of have to be accurate to an extent, but you don't have to follow it exactly like the reference if you get a little bit lost. So I'm just going to spend a bit of time just making sure I've got the shape of that right. Add a little bit of detail on there and on there. Okay, I'm going to start from the next row, so let's have a look at the top of this one. See, there's like a little one just in between the two, just there. Then once again, I'm going to start from below. And they do start to get a little tiny bit bigger So I'm going to keep that in mind. So this bit here comes right round like that. Having a little bit of variation between each one really helps as well with it looking more natural. You don't want them to be completely uniform. It'd look really boring and false if they were. So you do want a little bit of variation, and it's quite forgiving in that way because you can get away with getting bits wrong and slightly altering the size. So let's add another one here. If you need to take a break from this at any point, then please do. Don't get yourself stressed over these little scales. Take a breather, come back and look at it with some fresh eyes. But hopefully doing this one step at a time is more helpful than trying to rush through it. So let's add a little bit through the centre there. And even if you're finding this difficult, I would challenge you to keep going with it and don't give up. Just see if you can do it, if you really are patient with it. I'm going to add another little one here. My shapes have definitely gone a little bit funky there, but it doesn't really matter too much. It's not the end of the world. And I'm going to add a little one here in between these two. So again, use your putty eraser or whatever eraser you have to make little tweaks if you get something in the slight wrong place. So let's now move on to our next row. And this has got quite a big one on the top. Just here. Might just bring that out a little bit more. And it's got a little bit of a line there in the middle. Then let's do the one below it. Again, that sort of goes in like that a little bit. Have a little bit of a line down the middle. The more you can practice confusing things like this, the more confident you'll become in your drawing. And the more you're able to break things down into little shapes one step at a time. So this one, bring it down like that. And this doesn't just apply to pine cones, it applies to patterns in feathers and fur, like cat markings. All sorts of things have really complex patterns that to the naked eye you don't even know how to begin to decipher it. But if you break it down into one little bit at a time, it's the only way that you can do it, to be honest. And it does become more manageable. A little bit here. And I have started to lose my way a little bit with that original line that I've added in, but that was just a guideline. It's not perfect, it's just somewhere to give us a little bit of an idea of where the rows are. So let's have a look here. There's one just underneath. Just there, a little circle on the end of it. And I can see one in the dark under the shadow just poking out there, so add that there. Okay, I'm going to start from the top row again. They do start to get a little bit more rounded here as well, so I'm going to keep that in mind. Just start to follow this next row. There's like a little bit of a line there. Then definitely got that in the slight wrong place, but that's fine. Just going to add one in. Then a little bit of a pointy shape there. If you find something like this really confusing, what you can do is like add a little bit of a marker on your reference to show which bit you're drawing, or even like cut a little square out of a piece of paper and place it over the section that you're working on, and then you can just see that one little bit and work your way down. There's a few different tricks that you can use, but I feel like I've gotten used to it over the years, like being able to find where I'm up to on my reference. But if you're struggling, then don't be afraid to use little markers or little guidelines to show you exactly which bit you're on. So here, just adding one there, another one underneath it. Then I'm going to do another little one in between here, just to finish that off at the bottom. And again, they're even more rounded as we get to the left. There's like a little circular one, then a really small one underneath it. They are starting to get smaller. But I might have to do that a little bit bigger. I've not left a small space for it, I've left quite a big space, so that's fine. Might just cut that in a little bit there, and then do a little one there. One there. And I can't see one, but I am going to just add a little one there just to break that up. Might just fix the shape of that a little bit. So just take your time as we finish off this left hand side. It is a little bit harder to see what's going on. A few little rounded ones just on the edge to finish that off. And I feel like I've missed one at the front here, so I'm just going to add another little one here. Like that. And you should have something that looks along the lines of that. Don't worry if yours is different. Mine's not like the reference and it's not like the practice drawing that I did. They never look exactly the same no matter what you do. So we're now going to use our coloured pencils to once again outline this all over again, and then we can lock in that guideline. So I'm going to go a little bit darker with my coloured pencil choice than I have been doing with some of these studies, and I'm going to go straight to the Burnt Umber 280, a darker brown colour, just any dark brown that you've got, and you want a really sharp point for this because we're going to start to erase these lines with our putty eraser, and we're going to add our coloured pencil guideline in instead. So to make things a little bit easier, let's not confuse ourselves, we'll do it one at a time and we'll just erase it as we go. So going back in, just going to perfect all of these little shapes with the coloured pencil. So let's do this one here. There's no reason to rush something like this. This is a true test of patience. And you see how I'm still doing quite blocky, geometrical shapes that have got really straight lines. I'm not being really curvy or fluid with my motions. I'm being very like jagged and sharp with the lines that I'm making. So just take it one at a time. It's also very similar to drawing scales on a lizard or a snake or something like that. Similar processes where you're breaking it down one little scale at a time, looking for the individual shapes. Let's do this one. It's a very, very gloomy, dark day today. Filming this after the clocks have gone back in England, so it's getting dark already and it's only 4:15. But it's the perfect weather for drawing, so it's nice getting all cosy inside on an autumnal day like today, and it's about as autumnal as it gets outside at the minute. Just going around some of these little details. So this is where you can really perfect your shapes as well. So if you've got anything a little bit off and you just want to tweak it, you can do. Drawing it 3 times from the basic shape to the initial graphite line and then the coloured pencil line just really gives you that opportunity to make sure you've got everything right. If you went in straight away with the coloured pencils, you wouldn't be able to correct any mistakes or perfect anything, and it would be hard to lift it off with the eraser. So just gives you multiple opportunities to make sure everything's in the right place. And you're going to be so proud of yourself once you've finished this and seen what you're capable of drawing, because it's going to look very impressive when you see all these little details, little scales that you've drawn individually. So don't feel disheartened if you're not happy with yours, just trust the process. So feel free to put some music on or a podcast or an audiobook while we draw this little section, because I think we need to concentrate. So I'm going to shut up for a little bit and I'm going to let you get on with this and really get lost in all of these little shapes. Okie dokie, so you'll be glad to know that that's the hardest, most confusing part over with. So we've got our coloured pencil outline now. It's looking like a pine cone. Now it's time to start adding a little bit of a base colour so that we can start building up some dimensions, some shadows, some details and texture and whatnot in the pine cone. So looking at this pine cone, I would say that it's pretty orange overall. So let's go with an orange base colour to give it an orange undertone. And let's stick with the orange that we've been using. I'm using the Burnt Ochre 187 from the Faber-Castell Polychromos, and because we've got that nice dark outline, we can start to colour in all of these little scales in the pine cone with the orange, and we'll still be able to see the guidelines. Just make sure that you have got rid of all of your graphite lines. You've used your eraser to lift those out. Don't want any of those showing through. So we're being quite light with our base layer because we don't want to hit the limit of the amount of layers that you can add on your paper. If you're using a sketchbook like me, the amount of layers that you can add will be less than if you used a really high quality professional paper like hot press watercolour paper. I use the Fabriano Artistico for most of my drawings now. Sometimes I'll use pastel mat, but that's a whole other ball game. We won't get into that at this beginner stage. But my point is, you need to be very careful and don't press too hard until you get to the end where you can afford to add a little bit more depth, because we've got a lot of depth to add into this pine cone to get all of those dark shadows in between the little scales. So use a lighter hand, lighter than you think you need, because we can always go and add a little bit more of the orange. So I'm just going to speed this up a little bit. If you find that you are struggling to be lighter with your hand, again, I encourage you to use your pencil a little bit higher up. Don't hold it like this, because that's how you really press hard. If you want to press light, hold it a little bit further up, and it sort of forces you to be a little bit lighter handed. So you can do this bit pretty fast, but I'm trying to like unwind while I'm drawing this. I don't want to stress myself out. I'm trying to do it as quickly as possible. We're sort of stepping back from that now in this tutorial, focusing more on detail and refinement rather than being quick and speedy. And part of the fun of drawing is the process, so you want to enjoy it and not feel like it has to be over as quickly as possible. Okay, just make sure that's nice and even as much as you can. I have got some little grainy bits, but that's because of the paper that I'm using. Oops. Okay, so now we've got our foundations in place, we've got our outline, we've got our base colour, so we can start to add some shading and texture and detail. And because this pine cone is pretty high contrast, there's a vast difference between the dark parts and the light parts. I'm just going to go straight back to the darker brown, the Burnt Umber 280, and I don't think I'm going to bother with anything in between because I did a little bit of a practice and this colour worked really well going in and adding a little bit more definition. So I'm going to start from this one because I don't know why, I just felt like it. And using that dark brown colour, I'm just going to start to add some little bits of texture and shading, and I'm focusing on the darker areas as always, so just doing some tiny little motions, picking out some little bits of detail, slightly changing the direction of my pencil so that I get a little bit of variation. On the whole, the darker parts are on the left of all these little scales. Of course, some of them it's all the way around, but depending on where it is on the pine cone, like here, there's nothing to the right of these, so they don't need to be dark on the right hand side. There's no shadow, so we're focusing it to the left there, that left hand side, and then just blending through the rest of that scale. So just give your pencil a little wiggle, create a little bit of texture, and it's that simple really. You don't really need to worry too much about all the teeny tiny little details, because there is, if you zoomed in on this, there's so much detail, but we're stripping it back a little bit. We're just focusing on the darker parts and adding a little bit of texture. So again, focusing on that left hand side, blending into this little scale. I might add that little rounded bit just to the end. Then blend down. Like that. You do want to keep a nice sharp pencil for this, so do keep sharpening it if it gets a little bit blunt. And just keep on going. So this is where you can really learn about observation, drawing what you can see. A lot of drawing is just being able to figure out what you can see. And the more practice you get, the more things that you spot. Things take me longer and longer these days because I see more details than I ever used to. And it's just training that muscle, your observation muscle. If that even makes sense. So take your time with this. Again, feel free to put some music on or whatever you need to focus and unwind as you're drawing this. Using the exact same technique for all of these little scales, so it's just a case of seeing where the darker bits and the bits of texture are on each one. So as you get to the left here, they do start to get a little bit darker, so just keep that in mind. Keep looking for the dark bits and the light bits. And don't be afraid to go quite dark with it if you need to. Do you see how much that's started to come together now? Still looks a little bit flat, but we've got the initial structure of it all. Okay, so just darken any little bits you feel like you've not quite added enough, but we can come back to that brown later on if need be. The main thing we need to do now is add a darker colour to start adding a little bit more depth in those shadows. So let's go with our dark brown grey colour. I'm using the dark Sepia 175 from the Faber-Castell Polychromos. So you just want a really nice dark colour that's not black. It's like a little bit lighter than black with more of a brown tone to it. So what we're going to start doing now is going back in to all of these little scales and picking out these really dark shadows, doing little side to side motions still, and adding a little bit more depth between all of these little scales. So you're gradually taking the pressure off as you sort of blend those out, focusing more of the pressure in the little gaps. So again, just keep looking at the reference, seeing where the darker bits are, and you're not adding as much of this as you did with the dark brown. Being a little bit more careful. So again, make sure it's really sharp, then you can get in all of those little nooks and crannies. Just adding a little bit more of my darker brown there, where I missed a little bit. Okay, back to my dark brown grey colour. Okie dokie. So add any more last bits. If you think you've missed anything, I might go back to my dark brown again. My burnt umber 280. Might just go over some of these darker bits. I'm going to keep looking at the reference to see what level of depth I need. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I think we need a little bit more of an orange colour though. Something a little bit more vibrant and pigmented than the previous orange that we used. So I'm going to use the same orange that I used in the acorn And that is the Dark Cadnium Orange 115, so just a more vibrant, bright orange. And I'm just going to start to blend this into any areas that look a little bit more orange. So around here, there's definitely some little bits I could do with being a little bit more vibrant. And this is a very pigmented colour, so I'm not going too crazy with it. I think I might need a little bit more burnt ochre, the lighter orange colour. But just adding, wherever there's a little bit more of a red tone, just adding this in because it is a very red toned orange. A lot of it's on these little centre parts and then a little bit around the edges. I'm being very light, I'm not trying to go too crazy, we don't want it to look unnatural. But we do want to just add that extra little bit of interest, that extra tone. Just little taps of it here and there. And I might just add a little bit more of the lighter orange colour, so the burnt ochre 187, just to fill in any little gaps. If it's looking a little bit lacking in colour. Just be careful when you use this because obviously it's a bit of a lighter colour on top of darker colours. That's why I'm mostly just filling in some of these lighter gaps. Very loud car alarm outside. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it on the video. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I feel like it still looks a little bit flat though, so let's now add a little bit of black to really darken up those little bits in between. But we're going to be careful because it does look nice overall, it just needs that tiny little bit more depth and a very, very sharp pencil. So literally just focusing it in those little cracks and crevices. Not adding too much. I mean, you can add as much as you want, but I prefer my drawings not to look too dark. Because when it all sort of looks too black, it loses a lot of its shape. I like it to have quite a bit of light bouncing off it. once we've added the black, we might find we need to add some more of the other colours, but we'll see how it looks. So keep going until you're happy with it. You might find again that you need to add some more of the other colours back in. I think I might need a bit more orange and brown in places, but you could honestly go on forever and ever. And there comes a point where you have to say, okay, I'm happy with that now. Add a little bit more of my dark brown, my burnt umber 280. Blend that in. And let me know what your thoughts are on if I do a video at the end of this spread of autumn drawings where I do little shadows, because I'm starting to wonder if it'd all look better with a little bit of a shadow underneath. Just to set the scene a little bit more. They all look like they're floating a bit at the minute, which is fine. That was the look I was going for, but now I'm just wondering if I should add a bit more of an anchor with a little bit of a shadow. Okay, I add a little bit more of my brighter orange, my dark cadmium orange 115, and I might just pick out a few more little bits. I love this colour so much. Add a little bit more of my other orange, my burnt ochre 187. Just feel like it needs that slightly less vibrant orange. More of a rusted orange, this. And then I might be tempted, just to finish off, to add a few little highlights back in with my teeny tiny eraser. So this is my rubber pencil from Touch Story or March Story, I'm not sure which one is the brand. But I might just use this, it's very sharp, I've sharpened it. Use this to add a few little highlights back in. Lifting off the tiniest little bit. Anywhere that the light really catches. This is totally optional, I feel like it looks fine as it is, but I just feel like there's a few little highlights that I could pick out. It's not the best eraser in the world, but it does do the job. Okay. And I might leave that there. I feel like I'm pretty pleased with that. You could go on forever and ever and ever adding loads and loads of little details, but I'm just going to call that finished because I've been at that for quite a while now. A lot of the time goes into the actual drawing and sketching part of it, so you could always come back another day with some fresh eyes and add a little bit more detail. I hope you've enjoyed joining me for another autumnal tutorial, and I hope you've enjoyed spending a little bit more time creating something with a more complex structure. So yes, please do give this video a like if you enjoyed it because it really does help my channel out. Subscribe to see more tutorials and videos like this, and I will see you very soon for the next one. So have a wonderful day and bye for now.